Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Thanks for checking out my video. So today we're going to do something a bit different to most of my other videos and look at a completely different method of playing known as slide style playing. Most specifically in open E tuning. What I'm hoping to do here is just give you an overall introduction to the setup, a little advice on playing, and also show you a handy box or scale shape that should help you to start ripping some slide style guitar licks. So I first got into slide when I started listening to the blues. Obviously slide playing is really common in a lot of blues. A couple of artists I was listening to were people like Elmore James and Hound Dog Taylor, but also people like Tampa Red or Robert Johnson, who sort of mixed the slide licks in amongst other fingerstyle playing. Personally, I always was quite intimidated by the concept, as usually slide playing is done in alternate tunings to normal tuning. So essentially, a lot of our notes on the fretboard are rearranged, meaning you have to learn new positions or shapes for both chords and scales. However, when I actually started to break it all down and really look at it, a lot of it is actually easier than I ever thought. So, if any of you out there feel a similar sort of way, hopefully this video gives you a good intro and some courage to give it a go. Now, really, the big spark for me probably came when I first heard both Jeremy Spencer, Fleetwood Mac, or Duane Allman of the Allman Brothers Band. Really, after hearing these guys, I was basically hooked. And ultimately, my enthusiasm to get that sort of sound or tone and play that way immediately outweighed any fear or doubt I had. So definitely check out both of those guys if you're after some solid inspiration. The other main draw with these guys, for me anyway, is they both use open E tuning, which I think is probably the easiest place to start for guitarists who are most used to playing in standard playing. Okay, so just to start off, you can play slide on any guitar you like. There is no real rules to this. However, just as with standard playing, different guitars obviously will sound slightly different. Many old school players simply used acoustics. Elmore James used an acoustic with a pickup added in the sound hole. Hound Dog Taylor, I think, used some ugly Japanese guitars. Eric Clapton used the Strat. Duane Allman used an SG. Generally, I use a Telecaster. I personally really like the sound of humbuckers with slide, but I'm not really a big Gibson fan. I'm not really a fan of the price either. I find with a lot of work, I can get quite close to that sound on my telly. However, I am considering swapping out the net pickup for a humbucker. Ultimately, this is all just personal preference, and different people will like different guitars. I do find the telly and the singing coils without any drive also can give a really nice acoustic sort of sound. Yeah, so the next thing with your setup, whatever guitar you are using, you really want to raise your action nice and high. It doesn't need to be ridiculous. Let's see if you might be able to see mine, maybe. Not sure. But this should really help you out anyway, and it will stop you hitting the frets as you glide around with the slide. The next thing is you probably want to use some heavier gauge strings than normal. This is going to provide more tension and more support for the slide, but also give you a thicker and fatter tone as opposed to your normal gauge. I use 11s on my telly here. Many other slide players go heavier. Again, this is really just personal preference. I have heard Duane Allman actually only use 10 to 38, which is not very heavy at all. The next thing is choosing your slide. Now, there are obviously hundreds of options out there in a variety of different materials, but I think the most common are glass or steel. Again, this is another personal preference, but different materials will give you a slightly different sound. I use a glass slide. I find glass is typically a bit warmer than steel, and it's also what Dwayne Allman used, so I tend to stick to that. Now, when we play slide, more often than not, we are using an open tuning. While it is possible to play slide in standard tuning, usually an open tuning will make things a little bit easier and enable us to get more of that classic slide style sound. What this means is when we strum across all of our strings without fretting any notes, we get a major chord. With open E, we get an E major chord. This is done by changing 3 strings only. Our A string we tune up to a B, the D string we tune up to an E, and the G string we tune up to a G sharp. The reason I find this easy is usually as guitarists we all have a good understanding of our notes on the bottom string. This note is not changed, so if we are looking for chords, our first finger will still go to the same place and we just bar that fret. Open for E, across the 5th fret for the A, 7th for the B, and so on. Now, when we play rhythm parts, we just want to press down on the notes exactly the same as we would when playing any normal chords in standard tuning. However, when we want to begin to actually use the slide and get that classic raw bottle style sound, we need to play slightly differently. So I like to use the slide on my 3rd finger. I find this gives me quite a lot of control, allows me to use my first 2 fingers to lay across the string slightly, just behind the slide, and give a tighter or cleaner sound. And it also enables me to switch between the rhythm and lead parts easily in a song. But any finger you want to use is fine. If another way works better for you, then stick with that. A fair amount of players do use the slide on their 4th finger, I think. Different players will obviously play slightly differently. So when we use the slide, instead of pushing down, we actually want to really just sort of hold the slide against the string and glide it up and down with very little pressure or almost none at all really. If we apply too much, we're going to start to hit the actual frets with the slide and it's going to create a sort of knocking sound, which we obviously don't want. Like I said before, a very common approach in the setup for slide players is to raise your action pretty high, and this will help you to avoid that sound, but it will also allow your strings more space to vibrate, which can sometimes give a slightly bolder or fatter tone, which is obviously great for this style. This can be quite difficult at the start. I remember really struggling to get this right initially, as you do have to be really precise, but just keep practicing and you'll get it. You can start by just practicing going into major chords across all the strings, and as your touch and feel gets better, move to individual notes. The next thing we're playing with the slide is we actually want to aim our slide over the frets to get our notes bang on. When playing standard tuning, we obviously usually play and apply pressure between the frets. This cuts the string at the fret and ultimately makes our lives as guitarists easier, as we don't have to worry about being perfectly precise. Now with slide, obviously we are not applying that pressure, so we have to be much more precise when we play and aim to always get our slide perfectly over the fret itself to get that same note. The added bonus of this as well is it does allow us to play a broader range between notes, as we can now play quarter tones or any nuances between the usual notes, which may usually only be accessible by bending. This again can be a really tricky technique to get right, but at the same time it can be a great exercise for your ears and it will really improve your feel. It will be, or it should be, very obvious when you get it right or wrong. However, usually the nature of slide is everything can be a bit more raw and a little more messy. So sometimes if you do get it slightly out, it definitely can still work. So for lead playing and solos, we can still use all the same scales we know in standard tuning. but obviously everything has moved slightly, so this can be a little confusing. However, the most common scales used with blues tend to be both the major and the minor blues scales, and usually these are mixed together. So I'm going to show you, or try and give you, a pretty useful shape for the notes in these scales. Okay, if we go down to the guitar, we'll look at those. Okay guys, now firstly, from our root position chord, wherever we are, we have our root note on 3 strings on the same fret now. On the bottom E, on the top E, but now also on the D string as well. If we do this in C, to hopefully make things a bit easier to understand, we're going to go 8th fret, 8th fret on the D, and then we're going to go 8th fret on the top E. Okay. A common tone for blues playing is the flat 7, which is a whole tone or 2 frets below the root note. So obviously we've got 3 of those we can use as well now, which is going to be on the 6th fret, top E, on the D, and on the bottom E there. Another key tone is the flat 3rd, and also going between the flat 3rd and the major 3rd. Well, those are 3 and 4 frets up from our roots. So again, there's 3 of those we can use, which is going to be on the 11th and 12th fret, bottom E, D string, and then on the top E. But we also have one of those on the G string, and that's going to be on the 7th and the 8th fret. And then lastly, on our A string and B string on the 8th fret, we have our 5th, which is used in both the major and minor pentatonic. We can flatten this note by a semitone, or 1 fret, and we get the flat 5, which is used in the minor blues scale. And we can also go down to the 4th on the 6th fret, as this is also used in minor pentatonic and blues scales. This box shape here essentially gives us a really good hybrid of both the major and minor blues scales, and can give you loads of options for licks and whole solos, while the extension of the flat 3rd and the major 3rd can let you go a little further. Hopefully that all makes sense, but hopefully I've put the tabs up on the video as well. Definitely take the time to learn that shape and experiment with those notes, and you'll be ripping slide licks in no time. Another thing that's worth showing you just quickly is a really common blues rhythm, which I'm sure you all know. It just uses the 1, 4 and 5 major triad chords, but alternates between the 5th and the 6th notes of the scale on each chord. Now when we play an open E, we can bar across the fret for our major triad, and our 5th is now on our A string, but we are able to play this simple rhythm part by just hammering on the note a tone or 2 frets apart. So if I just do that again in C really quickly. Playing definitely not the best right there, but despite how well I do it, this is completely doable even with having the slide on one of our fingers, as obviously we only need one finger to do this. I think I was just doing it with my fourth finger there. Yeah, the only other thing that's probably worth mentioning is really, should we be using a pick or should we be using our fingers? Well, once again, that is just another personal choice. Artists like Dwayne used his fingers, whereas Jeremy Spencer, I think, used a pick. There are definitely benefits to using either. The tone will probably be a bit thicker if you use your fingers, and you'll probably get more attack and have more treble in your tone using a pick. I would just say experiment yourself, listen to some of the pros, and see what sound you prefer. Anyway guys, I hope this video has been useful and gets you going with your open E slide playing. Yeah, good luck, happy playing.